with lots of energy, we are going to start with today's session. We are going to discuss mock test 2 paper in this particular session. So here we have a question. Yes, mock test 2. So we have 6 questions, A, B, C, D. Let's start. They have already allotted the marks also. So you're supposed to write according to marks. First of all, Mr. Joy owns 2 flats in a building. He want to sell flat number 101 to Mr. Joy, who offered to sell his flat number 101 to Mr. Roy. Okay, Mr. Joy is offering this to Mr. Roy. Which flat? Flat number 101. Mr. Roy thoughts, that means understand Joy, Roy. Okay, he is a buyer, he is a seller. He is thinking that he is selling 101. He is thinking that he is buying 102. Now, considering the provisions of the contract, you are supposed to discuss about the validity of the contract. Understand, there are basic principles which are given, basic elements which are given, essentials which are given under section 10 of the Indian Contract Act, and there are few essentials which are given, not given in a section number 10. But all those elements or the essentials supposed to be there in a contract, then only it will be a valid contract, otherwise not. And one of the essential was concessius ad idem. If you guys remember, concessius ad idem is nothing but, first of all, there should be a clarity and clarity in the contract itself, and there should be a free consent by both the parties, and there should be whatever the contract you are making, it should be going in a same sense what the seller and buyers are thinking. So same thing in a same sense. This is nothing but concessius ad idem, and if that is missing in the contract, so that contract will not become a valid contract. Yes, the answer is right. The contract will not be a valid contract. So here this is provision part, here this is fact part. No, this is also provision. From here you can say that this is a fact, and here you are writing a conclusion. From inception it was it was not there is no offer and acceptance, so it is not even an agreement or a contract, because not even enforceable by law, because concessius ad idem was missing and it was not a valid. The second is paid up capital of RAM Private Limited is 10 CR. Okay, first of all, paid up capital is 10 CR. Out in the form of 7 lakh equity shares of rupees 100 each and 3 lakh of preference shares of 100 each. So 7 lakh equity and 3 lakh preference. So this is the composition of the capital. Now Lakhan Private Limited holding 3 lakh shares of equity in a RAM. So basically RAM having 7 and 3. This is equity and this is preference. Okay, lakhs. Now one more company is there, Lakhan Company, which is a holding company of RAM Limited. So this is holding and this is holding only. There is no holding subsidiary, but they are having 3 lakh of shares in a 3 lakh of equity shares in RAM. Lakhan Limited is having 3 lakh shares of RAM. Now you're supposed to decide whether the RAM and Lakhan having holding subsidiary relation or not. First of all, you're supposed to write the definition of holding. Secondly, you're supposed to write the definition of subsidiary company, and 2-3 points which are given in your module also below that. The second thing, the most important, we have seen that whenever you are talking about the subsidiary company means either holding a board of directors or a composition of board, or more than half of the voting power in the company together by them itself or together by any other subsidiary companies. Now here understand, voting power is given to the equity shareholders, but the question is silent about whether the preference shareholders having the voting power or not. So we presume that they are not having a voting power. So obviously we will not be considering preference shares while calculating or while deciding whether they are having holding and subsidiary relation or not. So in this given situation, we supposed to understand more than half means only more than 50% of 7 lakh. That means 3.5 lakh the Lakhan Limited supposed to hold in RAM to have that holding subsidiary relation, but they are having only 3 lakh. That means it is very clear that they are not having the RAM Limited is not a subsidiary of Lakhan Limited. I hope you understand. This line is very, very important. You're supposed to write this assumption that preference shareholders, we assume, because the information is missing, we assume that preference shares are not having voting rights. The next is write about the doctrine of caveat emptor and its exceptions. Caveat emptor means caveat emptor is let the buyer be aware. That means seller is not responsible for the wrong choice of the buyer. It's buyer's duty to inspect his goods, to check prima facie all his goods, and then he supposed to buy all the goods. So seller is no more responsible. But there are certain exceptions. They have given all the exception, all the 8 exceptions, but in exam they have asked only for 4. You can write only 4. Don't write all the points, all the points in detail, but you write the main heading points, right? Like fitness as to quality or use, goods purchased under a patent or trademark, brand name, description, sample, mercantile quality, sample and description, trade usage and defect, guilty, fraud. You write these headings, but don't discuss all the points in details, otherwise you will waste your time. For 4 marks, this is not expected. So choose any 4 out of these 8 points and you write, but write headlines at least of all the points. So fitness and the quality, in this situation, this is very simple. This is quite important point. If I asked to choose any 4, then I'll tell you which 4 I would have written. Obviously, first step will be whatever the 4 points you know, you write them. But if you know all the 8 points, then out of these 8, which 4 you're supposed to choose, that I'm going to tell you. The first is where the buyer makes known the seller, where the buyer makes known the seller the particular purpose. Seller is already aware about the purpose of the contract, or the purpose for which buyer is buying that goods. So purpose is already aware. Secondly, buyer is relying on the skills and the judgment given by the seller. So buyer is relying on seller's judgment on the skills and the description, goods or of the description which is given, and seller should be usually in the course of that business only. So if you are buying a guitar, the seller should be selling he is having the business of selling guitars only. It's not only one kind of activity, one time activity. He is having that business, usual course of business. So he is having that business. Buyer is saying that buyer has already told the seller that what his purpose, all about his purpose. And the third point is the buyer is depending on the seller's skills and judgment. Then in that situation, and if that thing is reasonably fit to him, then fitness and quality. One of the exception is fitness and quality. The second is the goods purchased under the patent or a brand name. That means obviously there is no implied condition that good will be in such a situation. Because of brand name you are buying some goods, then you for any kind of default in that goods, you cannot claim, you cannot ask the buyer that you are responsible for this. So yes, the second is that. The third is goods sold are not according to description. Obviously it is implied that whatever goods you are getting, that bulk should match according to your description also, and according to your sample also. And if sample and description both have been discussed, then according to that also. So if it is not, then seller is responsible, otherwise buyer is responsible. He is supposed to inspect that whether the goods are according to description and given sample or not. The next is mercantile quality. Obviously this is the rule of caveat emptor is not applied, where the buyer has examined the goods, and this rule is applied only if only if the defects were such which ought to have not been which have not been revealed by an ordinary inspection. That means you supposed to inspect all the goods, everything, but you cannot find the hidden defects in this goods. So for hidden defects, buyer is not responsible, seller is responsible. So that's why they have written this. The next is trade usage. That means the seller, if you ask me, then write first point, then you can write this second point, first point, second point, and this description and sample point. This and this point. Okay, either write description and sample, or you can write like this. Instead of writing description and sample separately, write this 6th point and write this, because of description and sample writing differently is just a kind of, and writing again this 6th point is kind of a repetition, correct? So don't try to repeat all the points. If you choose first point, second point, fourth point, and then 6th point. You can choose these 4, or you may choose these 2 remaining 2 also. If there is any fraud or something, then obviously buyer is not responsible. or any because of usage of trade. It is not fitting because of that. The next is given. I hope you understand. Very simple and easy. Private emptor means let the buyer be aware, but there are certain exceptions where the seller will be responsible. First of all, the buyer buyer is relying on the seller's judgment. He is having that skill. Buyer has already told him that his purpose, and he is ordinary in the course of his business only. Then seller is responsible. Secondly, the goods should be according to description, according to sample description and sample marketable quality. It should be exactly same as your marketable quality. Ordinary inspection, if you cannot find the defect, then obviously seller is responsible, buyer is not responsible for any hidden defect. If there is fraud, obviously seller is responsible. You can write all these points. The next question number 2.1. All the contracts are agreement, but all the agreements are not contracts. Comment. Now here, see, understand, they have given the distinguish also between the agreement and contract. So you can write all the points which are given there, but understand, if they have given, if they would have given that differentiate between these two, then write in a table form. If they are asking in a statement form, comment, then don't write in a table form, but you can write all the points which are already given in your module, the bit of differentiation between the agreements and contracts. So all the contracts are not agreement, all the agreements are contract. You can write agreement is offer plus acceptance. Whenever it is enforceable by law, then only it becomes a contract, otherwise it's only an agreement. So all the agreements cannot be a contract, but all contracts are agreements. You can write these all the enforceability point, prerequisites of existence. Understand, here don't what you can say, mug up these points. You can write even though you write main keywords, that's okay, absolutely okay, but only one word is important, that is enforceable by law, then only agreement becomes contract. So this is something which you're supposed to write. The next is Karan agreed to purchase a wooden table for his study room and from Mr. X. So table was in a good condition, which was examined by the Karan. So Karan agreed. Karan is a buyer, and who is seller would buy for his Mr. X. Mr. X is a seller. He is buying a table in a good condition, examined by the Karan before purchasing. Now he found no defect in it and paid rupees 20k for this table, and later on he found the leg was broken by Mr. X and it was pasted the wood and tried to hide the defect. Just now we discuss this point that if now understand. Yes, now according to can Mr. Karan return the table and claim for the amount back and give the reference of Indian Contract Act also. So understand, according to Indian Contract Act. Here this question you can write according to Sale of Goods Act also, and here this question you can write according to Indian Contract Act also. So what they are asking in question, you supposed to focus on that. First of all, if I talk about sale of goods, just now we saw that caveat emptor, mercantile quality and fitness of use and all that seller's judgment and all that, or mercantile quality, he is not responsible for any hidden effect. So immediately what happens, the word hidden defect leads student mind towards Sale of Goods Act. But the question is not all about Sale of Goods Act. It is all about the Indian Contract Act, first thing. So you're supposed to write according to Indian contract. What happens in Indian contract? Now in this, there is either an active concealment or not. So these all points they have given in the section 17, which talks about the false representation of the material facts. It's basically the fraud factor, which we have already just now we saw one of the question in the last video also of mock test 1. One of the question was there were 5 elements. If any one of the element is present, then you can say there is a fraud. The one of the element was any false representation of a material fact when made intentionally to deceive the other party to enter into a contract. This was one of the point they have given. Now here they have the other party has the intention to conceal it, hide it, and in such a way that by ordinary inspection you cannot judge that this particular table is not in a good condition, or yes or no. So that's why there is a kind of a fraud, and that's why what happens is Mr. Karan can resign the contract and can claim for a compensation because his intention was to defraud the creditors. Now understand, this actually basically this contract becomes voidable. The effect will be voidable. If Karan wants to accept, he can, otherwise he can make this contract as a void contract. So voidable means either void or valid, you choose whatever you want to. But in this situation, Karan is saying that he wants to repudiate the contract, so hence he can on the basis of fraud. So you can write effect by that is voidable contract section 19, you can write fraud section 17, and then write a conclusion of that, of the same. The next question is what do you mean by the designated partner, and is it mandatory to appoint a designated partner? This question is given under section 7 of LLP Act. Obviously every LLP must appoint a designated partner, but that designated partner should be the resident of India also, and that should be an individual also. So you understand, there should be at least two partners who are individuals, and at least one of them should be the resident of India. But in case of if in LLP all the partners are body corporates, then one or the more partners of the individuals of body corporate, at least two of the individuals will be the nominees of the board of body corporate. That means what? If company is coming as a partner, then company cannot become a individual, obviously, because this individual, they are talking about natural person. Okay, now company cannot be a natural person, it's an artificial person, so company cannot be appointed as a designated partner. For that you need a compulsory a natural person. But if all the partners of LLP are a body corporate, then nominees of these body corporate will be appointed as a designated partner in a LLP according to section number 7. But there should be two partners at least, and these two should be individual, and one of them should be individual partner, resident of India. Now next question is enumerate the differentiation between partnership and joint stock company. This is nothing but basically the difference of partnership and joint stock. This is very simple, you can write all the points whatever comes to your mind. First of all, partnership is nothing but having no legal entity. This have basically company and partnership difference. Here you don't share the profits, here you distribute the profits. Every partner is an agent, here not agent. Extent of liability, limited liability, jointly and severally liable in case of partnership. Property belongs to the joint property, joint estate. Here it's not a joint estate, it's the property of a company. Transfer of share is not easy unless and otherwise all the partners agreed. Here it is very easy to transfer the shares. Management restriction, registration is not compulsory, here it is compulsory, and all the remaining points you can directly go and check. Very easy question. The next is question number 3.2. Rohan is running a grocery store in a Delhi, and he sells his grocery stores including the goodwill worth rupees 1 lakh to Mr. Rohit for a sum of rupees 5 lakh. I am not going to discuss this question because this question is exactly given in your RTP also. RTP question, RTP video I have already uploaded. So this question was covered over there. You can go and check it out. That question, this question is basically about the section 27 of Indian Contract Act. The next question is 4.1. When can unpaid seller of the goods exercise his right of lien over the goods, and according to 1930, and can exercise his right of lien even in the property of the goods has been passed when such rights has been terminated, and whether if he has obtained a decree from a court to pay for receiving the price. So understand here 2-3 questions are already involved. So these 2-3 things. First of all, you're supposed to write about the right of lien. Right of lien can be exercised only in 3 cases. The first situation where the seller has sold the goods not on a credit, so sold without any stipulation of credit. The second is credit, the seller has sold the goods with the stipulation of credit, but the credit period has been expired, so credit term has been expired. And the second is buyer becomes insolvent. So in these 3 situations, the unpaid seller can exercise his right of lien. This is very clear, simple. This is all about the right of lien. So this is a provision part. Now termination, when there is a termination of right of lien, is first when that means seller delivers the goods to the carrier or the bailee for the transmission to the buyer without reserving the right of disposal of the goods, and where he or where when the buyer or his agent lawfully obtain the possession. That means what happens is, understand, termination of lien happens when when the right of stoppage in transit begins, if you guys remember. So whenever the buyer is becoming insolvent, and second thing, the seller has already given his goods to the lawfully handed over the goods either to the buyer or his agent or to the carrier or a bailee, then in that situation his right of lien terminates right out there and his right of stoppage in transit begins. So first of all, he can exercise, but only in these three situations. Secondly, if he has not reserved his right of disposal according to section 25 and he has already given the property to the carrier or bailee, or he must have given to the buyer or to his agent, then his right of lien, what he can say, terminates. And the third and very important, even if he is getting the decree from a court, still he can exercise his right of lien. So these are the three answers of these three questions. Now the next is Sohan, Rohan and Jay are the partners in a partnership firm, and they have the firm is dealer in a office furniture. They have regular dealings with the AB and Company, Messrs. AB and Company, the supplier of furniture for the business. 30 June 2020, one of the partners, Jay, died. Okay, so this question is all about death of the partner, and to supply it on the 25th of March, 25th of May. So understand, Sohan, Rohan and Jay are the partners in what? In partnership firm, and they are dealing with Messrs. AB and Co. Messrs. AB and Co. They are going to supply the furniture. On 30th June, one of the partner, Mr. J, died. So on 30th June, Mr. J died. So death. Now what happens? On 25th of May, the firm has ordered from this firm has ordered supply of furniture on 25th of May. So they have ordered on 25th of May when Jay was alive. But now what happens is, now Sohan and Rohan continues the business of the firm even after the Jay's death. The firm did not give any notice of the Jay's death to the public and the other person dealing with the firm. Now what happens is, they are getting the furniture, but now afterwards the firm becomes insolvent and fail to pay the price to Messer of the furniture to AB and Co. Now AB and Co file the case against for the recovery of furniture. What will happen? So if they are getting if they are receiving the furniture, obviously they are liable to pay that amount. But this contract was happening on when Jay was alive, but the goods have been delivered after the death of one of the partner. They have not given the public notice. Now what are the consequences? Understand, basically, first of all, this is all about section number 35. 35 talks about, this is quite important section. So section 33 and 35 are quite important from your examination perspective also. Expulsion, insolvency also, and this death of the partner or even retirement. These four questions these four provisions you will be getting one question in your exam. So focus. Where under a contract between the partners, the firm is not dissolved by the death of the partner and the estate of deceased partner is not liable for any of the act of the firm done after his death. This is very simple. Further, in order that the estate of the deceased partner may be absolved from the liability for the future obligation of a firm, it is not necessary to give a public notice, whether they are giving public notice or not, in case of death only. In case of death, it is not necessary at all to give a public notice of a death. Now in the given situation, what happens? So this is all about the provision. Okay, this is all about the this much is fact part, in fact or explanation you can say, and here they will be discussing only the question. Okay? Now the conclusion is, so the estate of deceased partner may be absolved. Absolved is nothing but discharge. Why discharge? Because discharge from the liability. Why? Because he is not responsible for all the acts done after his death, and there is no need to give the public notice. So when the contract was entered, he was alive, that's okay, but when the property was transferred, he was not alive. So in that situation, Rohan and Sohan, I guess, who were the two, Rohan and somebody, the two partners, the remaining two partners here, Rohan and Sohan, will be responsible for the same and not the deceased partner. The next question is, The next question is this question, Ayuk purchased question. This question is also there in RTP. So go and check that RTP questions. This question, memorandum of association is a charter. This is a straightforward direct question. Like what we have discussed, like similarly ultra wires. So similar, this question is also straightforward question here. Understand, you just write, supposed to write section number 399 plus along with that 6 clauses which are there in a memorandum, object clause, name clause, capital clause, liability clause, association clause, register clause. So these 6 clauses you write 1-2 lines in all these clauses. Like in case of name clause, you're supposed to write private limited word, public limited. In case of section 8 companies, there is no need to write any limited word afterwards. In case of OPC, you're supposed to write OPC in bracket. So these 4 points you can write in name clause. Capital clause, you can write the name of the person, subscribers to the memorandum along with the number of shares and their signature. Then registered office clause, that means your office address. Then liability clause, whether it's limited by shares, limited by guarantee, unlimited, what kind of liability you have. Then association is to association of a person, and which was capital, register office, liability clause, association clause, and which was the pending one. I guess I discussed all the clauses. Yes, I've discussed all the clauses. So you just write these 6 clauses. The next question is question number 6. Write about the quasi contracts and its characteristics. So understand, quasi contract is nothing but like a contract, kind of a contract which is imposed by law. It's not a contract where there is no offer, there is no what you can say acceptance from the other party. It's just a duty which you're supposed to fulfill because it's imposed by, this kind of contract are imposed by the law. And what are the characteristics? Only these characteristics, 5 characteristics. First of all, it is imposed by law. It's the duty and not a promise. The right is under it is always a right to money, and generally, though always not liquidate the sum of money. The 4th point is this right available against specific person and not against the whole world, only against the specific person and not against the whole world. And a suit for a breach of may be filed in same way in case of competent contract. Like this is exactly like a contract only, so you also get the right to file a case against the other party. It's not something it is because it is imposed by law you cannot file a case. You can file a case also. So it's resemble to a contract. It's just effect will be the same, only it's kind of the contract which are where you have a duty imposed by law, obligation to fulfill. That's it. This is all about the quasi contracts. The next question is dissolution. Write about the dissolution. What does the dissolution of partnership form takes place under the provision of Partnership Act? So dissolution thing means what? Dissolution. So there dissolution is because either because of the insolvency or by retirement or because of the death of the death of the partner, insanity of the partner. These are the reason because of which your firm may get dissolved. But understand but it's all about on the partners whether they want to continue or not. It's everything is on the partner. So there is difference between the dissolution of partnership and dissolution of firm. So you can write all the points which are there in your module, the differentiation points. You can choose the 2-3 statements and you can write over here in case of dissolution of firm. Now understand dissolution of firm, which are the cases. The first of all, voluntary dissolution was there. If you guys remember, we were having section number 39, 40, 41, 42 and 43, I guess, and 44. So we were having 6 questions on this, 6 sections on this, where you were talking about the voluntary dissolution, not by the order of a court and order by order of a court. So not by order of a court, either voluntary dissolution or compulsory dissolution because of happening of some events or your business becomes unlawful. And see here they have given, see, agreement between all the partners, compulsory dissolution because it becomes unlawful, or because of the intervention of courts. You were having 6-7 points. If you guys remember, you just try to remember that chart which is given in your module also. That chart, whether there is a permanent incapacity of a contract, unsound mind, misconduct, all the 7 points you're supposed to write only the points and not try to elaborate this all these points. Why? The reason is very simple. This question is only for 4 marks. Don't write everything in your exam. Write only the heads. So because of court and not because of court, section 44 and section 40, 41, 42 and 43, because voluntary compulsory dissolution. Now the next question, last question, I have already covered in the RTP module, RTP video itself. So this is all about today's session. Let me know in a comment section which which are the questions which you find difficult, or the concept which you find difficult, which you want me to make a video on. And please do like, share, comment on our videos. Take care. Goodbye. All the best.